Want to find out just how different the original tale of Mickey's Brave Little Tailor was? Well, I've read the original Grimm Brothers tale, or tales, of the Brave Little Tailor, and it's radically different. Let's see just how much Disney transformed Brave Little Tailor. Well, hello there! My name's Jeremy and welcome back to Freeform Disney, where I talk about all aspects of Disney, from the animated movies to the theme parks to Star Wars, Marvel, and Pixar, and the TV shows, and everything else in between. And that is why it's Freeform. And keep coming back every day for new daily content. If you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now on to today's topic. Transformed by Disney. The radically different original tale of Brave Little Tailor. Disney's Brave Little Tailor was made in 1938, a year after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and it was based on the original Grimm Brothers tale from the 1800s. The Grimm Brothers originally set out to put in writing many of the German folk tales which were told orally throughout their country, as they didn't want them to be lost. But it's a little more complicated than that, as the Grimm Brothers released 7 different editions of their tales. Once their book proved to be popular, they made revision after revision, refining the stories and getting more artistic. They made widespread revisions and even took out and added entire stories. A story about a brave tailor was one of the original tales from the 1812 first edition and was still present in the 1857 7th edition. I've read both, and I'll make my main comparisons in this case to the 7th edition. That's because the first edition actually has 2 different stories, while the second one combined them into one story. But don't worry, I'll definitely let you know about some of those differences between the first and 7th Grimm Brothers editions. Make sure to stick around to the end to hear what those changes are between the editions and also to hear the different ending to the original tale. So without further ado, let's jump right on in. Now before we actually start into the actual book, let's talk about the name of the story. Disney titled theirs simply Brave Little Tailor. In the 7th edition by the Grimm Brothers, they called it The Valiant Little Tailor. And in the first edition, they called it A Story About a Brave Tailor. Pretty much the only thing that has stayed consistent through all of this is that it's about a tailor, although not necessarily a human tailor. As we open the book to page 1, one summer's morning, a little tailor was sitting on his table by the window. He was in good spirits, and sewed with all his might. Well, that's different right out the bat now, isn't it? In the Mickey short, we start by seeing a mob of concerned citizens and a giant poster warning us about a big, scary giant. Well, they're scared anyway. The giant is a bit too goofy to be scary. And no, I don't mean that goofy. Gosh. For the Grimms, the entire story is from the point of view of the tailor, while Disney uses the villagers on a couple occasions early on to carry forward the story. Also, the Grimms never have any town that is truly being terrorized by a giant. The giants in the Grimm's tale, while they are described as robbing, murdering, ravaging, and burning out in the country, are more of a nuisance than an existential threat. I guess that's just how you look at it when you're rich and behind castle walls, perhaps, right? On to Mickey, our brave little tailor. He's busy sewing and flies are buzzing around him. In the short, there seems to be no particular reason the flies are buzzing around Mickey, while in the tale, it is jam that has attracted the flies, or an apple. In fact, prior to this, we see the tailor buy the jam from a peasant woman who he treated poorly. The tailor in the Grimm's tale can be a bit of an ass sometimes. Mickey, like the original tailor, eventually gets fed up with the flies and kills them in one blow. In each case, it is 7, or at least 7, flies that are killed. While Mickey kills them with 2 fly swatters, the Grimm's tailor did it with a piece of cloth. The Grimm's original tailor takes this opportunity to embroider 7 at one stroke on a girdle he would wear, knowing that people would mistake its meaning and think he had killed 7 people in one stroke. Mickey, on the other hand, accidentally makes a claim that is misinterpreted, because Mickey has to be more virtuous than our original tailor. So a group of villagers are gathered outside Mickey's window, and one asks another, "Say, Did you ever kill a giant? Really an absurd question given everyone's massive fear of a single giant. If some random person had killed a giant, I doubt they'd be quite so scared. So really, I can't for the life of me think of a reason that one would ask that other than to set up the misunderstanding that was about to happen next. So right after that, Mickey throws open the window and exclaims, "I killed 7 with 1 blow." Imagine that in a Mickey voice, though. So the villagers don't ask anything of Mickey, and clearly seem to believe a tailor to be capable of killing 7 giants with 1 blow, somehow. For the Grimms, the tailor is thought to have killed 7 people with 1 blow, and never lets anyone think he was merely a tailor, as they would not have believed him otherwise. But nevertheless, Mickey's villagers were very gullible, and did believe him. And they gossiped the information from one person to another, to another, to another, to another, until it reached the ear of the king. But in the original Grimm tale, the tailor doesn't live in the same location as the king, and so the king would not hear of him until he came to the courtyard of the palace. And in the Grimm tale from the 7th edition, there's a whole mini-adventure side quest issue that happens first, as the tailor runs into a different giant along the way. And that's really an opportunity for the tailor to show off his wits and show that he doesn't need his strength to beat a giant. The giant performs tasks, and then the tailor has to show that he can do so too, or even one-up the giant. The giant goes ahead and squeezes water from a rock, so the tailor squeezes liquid out of cheese. The giant throws a stone so high it could barely be seen, so the tailor throws a bird he had in his pocket up into the air and it flies away. The giant lifts a giant tree, and the tailor offers to carry the heaviest part, which he says are the branches and twigs. Although, even better, he actually just sits on the trunk and is carried by the giant, who can't turn around to see that the tailor isn't actually holding the tree up at all. There are a couple more tricks played, and then after all of this, the tailor eventually comes across the courtyard of a royal palace and lays down to sleep in the grass. In the Disney short, Mickey is summoned to the king, as is the Grimm's tailor, after the king has heard of the tailor killing 7 in 1 stroke, either by gossip or from people reading it on his girdle. Here, in case you don't think things already had, well, events start to really diverge between Disney and the Grimm Brothers. In both cases, the king will issue a quest to the tailor to kill at least 1 giant, and in return the tailor is to get the princess's hand in marriage. But for Mickey, it's a noble quest to save the people being beset upon by the giant, and the king is desperate for the help from Mickey. He has to increase the monetary reward, as Mickey doesn't want to take the quest. Eventually, Princess Mickey whispers into the king's ear a great idea to offer her hand in marriage to Mickey. And after she kisses Mickey, well, Mickey is quite smitten because, well, it's Minnie. Princess Minnie, I should say. And so Mickey accepts. But for the Grimm's tailor, things go a little bit differently. First, when he arrives at the courtyard, he is employed by the king in the king's military service. But then the soldiers both despised and feared the tailor who had killed 7 in 1 stroke. So they all left the king's service. Or some number less than all of them, because we see more later. But a bunch of them left the king's service. This means that the king was now angry with the tailor and wished he could be rid of him. But he too was scared of the tailor and worried that if he tried, the tailor would kill him and take his kingdom. Kind of funny to be worried about losing your kingdom if you're going to be dead anyway. So the king devised a quest to hopefully get rid of the tailor. If the Grimm's tailor could vanquish 2 giants way out in the country in a forest who were bothering some of his people, then the king would give the tailor his daughter's hand in marriage and half the kingdom as a dowry. Unlike Mickey, this tailor didn't hesitate to say yes. He saw it as a great chance to gain a lot of power and money for himself. While the Grimm's tailor is quite confident in himself, Mickey is incredibly scared and almost bolts once he's outside the castle gates. On top of that, Mickey is by himself, but the Grimm's tailor is accompanied by 100 horsemen. Just to comment on how big a threat the giants are in the Grimm's tale. Not something we think a little tailor can go ahead and defeat. From here on out, though, about the only similarity between the stories is that the tailor will win, he'll do it through his cunning, and eventually he'll get the princess's hand in marriage. Mickey has a fun fight with the giant, and then he's alive and at the end, and everyone turns the whole area into the fairground. King's eating some ice cream on the carousel. Whee! Happy times! The end. But in the Grimm Brothers tale, well, here's a quick summary of what happens. The tailor leaves the horseman outside the forest, heads on into the forest, finds the giant sleeping. Then he climbs up a tree and starts throwing rocks down at them until he's able to get them so mad at each other that they fight each other to death. So then he heads on down, stabs him a few times for good measure, walks on out, tells the horseman that he did the job, and they all end up returning to the palace with the tailor triumphant. But the king doesn't concede yet and tries twice more with quests. Good old rule of three. Once with a murderous unicorn, and once with a rampaging boar. And the tailor, of course, overcomes both of these difficulties. Then the king finally admits defeat, and the tailor is married to the princess. But we're still not quite done. For now, the princess hears the tailor talking in his sleep and discovers that he was a tailor based on what he said. So the king decides to have some of his men kidnap the tailor and have him shipped off to some foreign land while the tailor is asleep. But the tailor is informed of the plan and outwits them. The story ends with the lines, "When these men heard the tailor speaking thus, they were overcome by a great dread and ran as if the wild huntsmen were behind them, and none of them would venture anything further against him. So the little tailor was and remained a king to the end of his life." Yay, the tailor, who is a bit of an ass, had won. But hey, he's cunning, and he's not royalty, so root for the little guy at least, right? And with that, we've reached the quite different end of the story. But there are differences between the 1st and 7th edition I mentioned, right? So what about that 1st edition? In the 1st edition, there were actually 2 separate stories. The 2nd story is actually incomplete. They weren't able to fully recover it. But it does start similarly with the tailor killing the flies, except that he actually killed 29 with one stroke. So then he heads out into the world, runs into the giant who he one-ups in tasks like squeezing water out of a rock, and that encounter with this giant only exists in the 2nd incomplete story in the Grimm Brothers 1st edition. The other thing that's exclusive to that 2nd story, in the 1st edition anyway, is the purchasing of the jam from a peasant woman. In the 1st story, it's actually an apple he has, and he doesn't buy it, he already had it to start with. Those are the main differences in the 2nd story of the 1st edition, and that makes up most of what that is before it cuts off, and we don't know what the remainder of that story would have gone on to say. So all the other events I mentioned from the 7th edition are actually quite similar to what happens in the 1st story in the 1st edition. Largely, the 7th edition compared to the 1st, somewhere in the meantime, those 2 stories were combined into one single cohesive story, so it's enhanced with further flourishes and better writing, and it's definitely better than the 1st edition's 2 separate stories. And really, the Grimm Brothers tended to make all their stories better from the 1st edition. The 1st edition was more of an attempt to collect what was legitimately said, what those tales were that were out in the wild in Germany. Whereas later editions had more flourishes, got more dramatic, the writing was better, they were taking more liberties with the writing. And so that's what you end up seeing in the 7th. At this point, I might usually recap what the biggest differences would be between the Disney and the Grimm's version. But the truth is that the Disney version feels more like an inspired by version than a based on or an adapted version. So the things that were most similar between the versions are the tailor having killed a bunch of flies at the beginning, people finding out by one means or another that he killed 7 in one stroke, then being sent by the king on a quest to kill 1 or more giants, winning through his cunning and ingenuity, not brute strength or anything of that nature, and finally, winning the princess's hand in marriage. So I hope you've enjoyed this journey through Brave Little Tailor. Is there a Grimm Brothers tale you would love to see Disney turn into a short or movie? Let me know down below in the comments. And as always, I'll try to respond to everyone's comments as best I can. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please go ahead and help me out and give it a like and share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to come back for tomorrow's video. And if you haven't done it yet, click that subscribe button and ring that bell. Have a magical day, and may the force be with you always.